What is up, guys? Coop here, and today we're going to be doing a Unholy DK guide. So I gotta say though, Unholy DKs have been one of my favorite classes to play this expansion. Obviously, I've been a DK main since Wrath of Lich King, since it first came out, honestly. But the Unholy DK is one of my favorite sort of classes and how they present it in this expansion. So they're basically a melee-based pet class, which is really cool and interesting to play. They have a variety of different spells and different abilities that can really help out with a raid group, and with their special toolkit can push you through some of those fights. So let's actually dive in and discuss them. So the first thing we're going to be looking at is stats. Stats wise, strength is always the number one thing you pick, along with mastery. So strength scales better than mastery for just increasing the flat out damage that you do. However, mastery is going to be the secondary stat that you're going to be striving for the most, because it gives you a flat increase in the percentage of shadow damage you do, which pretty much everything you do is shadow damage. So that's very important to have as well. Next is haste. You want to have haste at 20%. Now you might be saying, why is haste only at 20%? Wouldn't you want it to be more higher, get a little bit more regen of your runes, and increase that attack speed? Well, actually, there is a talent that increases our attack speed already by 100% as long as we follow through with our rotation. And that's very important to keep in mind. So the only really reason that we need haste right now is so that we can increase our rune regeneration to be high enough to where we can maximize our output without having to put too much into that one stat. Sounds very complicated, but basically you just want to have haste at 20%. Just because the rune regen is fast enough, and we're going to be using other ways of getting it. So that's important. After that, it's pretty much just a debate if you want crit or versatility. Versatility is good for progression, just because it increases the damage and your healing, and also decreases damage. So it's kind of like a little way of like, hey, you don't take as much damage and you get a small increase. And then crit's just like flat out like, hey, the chance is higher for you to do more damage. So if you're looking for a flat DPS increase, crit. If you're looking for something that gives you a little bit more survival in the toolkit, versatility. Just keep in mind, a dead DPS is no DPS. So if you're struggling a little bit, versatility is definitely the way to go. But I personally like crit because I've obviously learned all the fights. But over time, crit is definitely kind of the go-to for if you want to get a DPS increase. So let's actually dive into the talents. I know I already discussed one talent in here, but let's talk about them. So the first tier, there's really only 2 picks in it. I wish all will serve worked. It's so cool looking just having 2 pets, but sadly Blizzard has not buffed it up enough, and it just isn't good. And it's sad. But basically it would have added a secondary sort of skeleton minion that has like a ranged attack. And it kind of sucks that it's gone, but it is what it is. I'm not going to be too butthurt about it. But the first thing that we need to look at is Ebon Fever. We'll get to Bursting Spores in a second, but it's easier to explain this one first. This one increases our Plague's damage by 20% over time in half the duration. So basically, this increases one of our main spells. So the Plague that we're going to be spreading with Outbreak is actually our highest damage output. Which is weird to say, because you're a melee-based fighter, which your highest thing is actually your dot that you place. Which is really weird to say, but this increases our damage, and it's very nice for single-target fights. This is the go-to talent that you pick for single-target fights, and it's also very useful if they add like a couple of adds in the back, or if you have a little bit of AoE fights in between. It's just the one that works for all situations. Now, talking about AoE, the actual best one for AoE-based fights is Bursting Spores, but not for single target. And the reason for that is it makes it to where our Festering Wounds do 50% more damage when they burst, and all enemies within 8 yards of the burst suffer an amount of damage. So, that's very important to keep in mind, because you have a talent that's really good at single target in all situations a little bit, or one that's specifically good for AoE. So that's very important to keep in mind. Now, if you do have the legendary of the instructor's 4th lesson, this one's a really good one to kind of pick with it, as it does a crap ton of damage if you mix those two together. But in reality, even with this legendary, I've found that so far Ebon Fever is very nice to have, because in Antorus the Burning Throne, you have a lot of fights where you're moving around a lot, such as the World Breaker, because every time you break one of the cannons, you have to run away, and having that dot do more damage while you're running away is more important. And there's just a variety of different examples I could show for that. Now, it's not the same for everybody, but that's just one of those things with the legendary. It's kind of like it works on some fights, it doesn't work on others, but it's not too much of a importance. Now, the next tier, sadly, all these suck. All of them suck, besides the second one. The second one is important because every 8 festering wounds you do causes 1 rune to generate. And this is important because your rotation requires you to use a lot of runes, and runes are sort of required to do some of your biggest spells. So Outbreak requires a rune. Festering Strike requires 2 runes, which gives us our wounds. And then Scourge Strike requires 1 rune. It's just very important to have these runes regen. So having this is very important and is kind of required because you kind of need it. Now, next is sort of a tier that it can be used in a variety of different ways. Unholy Frenzy is the go-to. It is good in every single situation. It is the #1 thing that you need. Just because it helps out with why we have such low haste. If you don't really have it, it kind of defeats the purpose of having low haste. Now, Clawing Shadows is a really good one to use for Mythic Plus, as it replaces Scourge Strike and instead does a bunch more of shadow damage. So if you look here, it's almost double the amount of shadow damage, so that's very important to keep in mind. Also, keep in mind it also scales with our mastery, so just a nice little thing to throw in there. As for this tier doesn't matter actually at all. You can pick whatever you want on this one. I choose the Sludge Belcher because it allows our pet to survive a little bit longer, and also just looks cool because, you know, you have this big fat dude that just has like his meat cleavers and attacks the boss. Also, it gives him access to the hook ability, which allows him to, it doesn't taunt, don't worry, it doesn't taunt. It just pulls him to jump right at the target. So that's very important to have. Next is another sort of tier that you get to pick whatever you want. If you're trying to obviously soak up damage and just survive in general, Soul Eater and Corpse Shield is very nice. Soul Eater is important because it allows you to sort of run through a mechanic. So, for example, if there's lava all over the ground, you can use your anti-magic shell and just kind of run out of it. So, that's very important to have. I choose Lingering Aberration because, well, the DK is known for not having much mobility, and that's why I chose the Worgen class and have that. So I have Wraith Walk that pops up every 30 seconds and allows me to run away really, really fast. So as you can see here, I am running and I'm, you know, super gone from whatever was about to hit me. And then I also have Dark Flight to kind of partner up with that. Now next is a good tier as well. I like this tier because it has 2 different things that you can bounce between. Shadow Infusion is a really, really good talent, and it's good in some scenarios. Basically, what it does is whenever you use Death Coil, one of the main things is your rotation, it reduces the cooldown of Dark Transformation by 7 seconds, which is another DPS cooldown that you really need to focus on. Next is Necrosis. Now, this one used to be good. They're changing it a little bit, so I'm not really sure how it's going to work. They might be changing completely how it works, but basically whenever you deal damage with a Death Coil, it causes your next Scourge Strike to do 40% more damage. At this time, it's not good, but if they change it in the future, this one might be the go-to pick. So we'll see how it goes in the future, though. But as of right now, this one does not scale well with what is going on. Infected Claws is the go-to one that I like to do because it makes my Abomination's Cleaver attack have a 35% chance of causing a festering wound. You want to have as many festering wounds as possible with a cap of 8. Basically, it sucks having to spend 2 runes because you get to do less Scourge Strikes. So having it to where your pet has a chance to do it makes it a lot easier for you in the long run. It just allows you to not have to spend as many runes, so we're saving runes and we are gaining our sort of dot and not having to worry about it. Now the next one is another one that is a mixture of AoE or a boss fight. So it's the same thing as the scenario that was up on the 56 talents. Dark Arbiter is good at pretty much all the different situations and for single target, but Defile is really good for AoE. Now let's actually talk about the Dark Arbiter, because this is one of the #1 ways that DKs are screwing up their DPS. Okay, so it summons a Valkyrie that attacks for 20 seconds. This replaces the summon Gargoyle, by the way. And the Valkyrie will gain 1% increased damage for every 1 runic power they spend. This is very important. A lot of people screw this up. They just pop it and then they just continue and they don't use their death coils to increase the damage. When you pop this girl, you want to make sure that you have pretty much maxed out runic power so that you can increase her DPS, which will make you go up on the meter. So please, for the love of God, pay attention to that. That is very important, and I've seen so many guys just be like, yeah, and you just pick this. It's like, I want to make sure that everybody understands that you want to use as much runic power as possible in that 20 seconds so that this girl can do some massive deeps for you. Very important to have there. Defile is the AoE talent, where it just basically does the same thing as Death and Decay. However, every second any enemy is standing in Defile, it grows in size and increases your mastery up to, or by 300%, and stacks up to 10 times. So it gives you a crazy amount of damage on AoE fights. So if you're going to do AoE, you're just going to pick those two, boom. But if you're going to be doing say like a boss fight or something, you're going to be wanting to do that. As I said though, when it comes to Antorus the Burning Throne, this is sort of the build I go for. I like the Lingering Aberration because a lot of the fights require a lot of movement. Things such as, I would say, like the Fellhounds and trying to get out of the purple circle, Portal Keeper just trying to, in general, just get out of those different mechanics there. ENR running around trying to stop them from the sort of tower defense game. Eminar's not a good one for that. Kingaroth trying to kill the different Fel Reavers. Veramafris with trying to get out of the little circle on the outside. Covenant of Shavara just in general to get out of those ghost armies. Agramar's you don't really need it for. Argus is definitely one that you could use it for. But in general, I find Lingering Aberration a really good one for if you are lacking mobility. So, now that we've actually talked a lot about talents, let's talk about relics. So relics are important because they are one of the other ways that you can majorly increase your DPS. So I'm just going to be listing off some of the best talents to get, as you really can't control what the relics give you. But I mean, well, you kind of can, but sometimes they have stats that you can't choose between. So let's talk about that. So the first one is Dark Crusade. This one's really good because it increases your Fallen Crusader Runeforge by 50% because I have 5 in it, but it basically goes up 10% each time you put a point in it. This one's very important. A lot of people forget to Runeforge their weapons for some odd reason. Don't forget to do that, as this is very important. It heals you for an amount of damage and increases your strength by a certain amount. That's very important. That's like one of your main DPS increases, so don't forget about that. For the love of God, don't forget about that. But next one we're going to be talking about is another one that is one of your top ones, Plaguebringer. This one's actually the major one. If you can get this one, please get this one. So Plaguebringer increases your plague by a percentage. Now, the other one that I'm looking for, oh, here we go, Deadliest Coil. Now, this one is good because of the 4-piece that drops in Antorus. It increases the damage dealt by Death Coil. Now, this one's very important because if we look at, say, a piece, we'll look at, I guess, MNR. Here we go. It increases the Death Coil causes by 35% over 4 seconds, and it has a 20% chance to deal damage a second time. So, that's very important for if you have the 4-piece, just in general, because it does a lot of damage. And then if we look again, there is one more, which is Lash of Shadows, which increases how much your festering wounds deal when they burst. So that's sort of the ones that you can do. You can't always control it. There are some other good ones, but I would really not suggest runic tattoos. It's just not that good. It just doesn't really help out too much. Okay, now let's actually talk about your spells here. I know this is a lot to dive in, but trust me, understanding everything about the DK is very important. So the first thing that you need to know is Outbreak. This is sort of the first spell that you're going to be using as you walk up to the target. Because, you know, there's always that part where all the mages are kicking your butt because you're still having to walk up to the boss. But have no fear, you have a dot. Now this dot does a variety of different things. Which is weird to say because you think, oh, it's just a dot. No, it actually does a variety of things that are very interesting because not only does it deal damage, but it has a 6-second ticker to where it spreads to nearby targets. So, if I were to drop this on this, as you can see here, boop, Outbreak, it's spreading to other targets, and as you can see here, it's spreading to all the different targets, and now they all have it. Now, over time, this thing is going to drop, and so will it with everything else, but unlike most classes like the Boomkin, where you have to constantly switch between targets constantly, which is kind of annoying, you can actually just drop it once and boom, it spreads to all the targets. So that's very helpful for you. You don't have to worry too much about having to target all these different people. You can just drop it once and be good. So this is your main thing that you want to keep up. As you can see here, I have weak auras up for making sure that I am reminded about it. Let's see, I'll just dismiss my pet real quick for this. And then the next thing that we need to look at is Festering Strike. So Festering Strike is a massive damaging ability, but what is important is it adds stacks of Festering Wound. And Festering Wound basically does damage when we pop them, and then also gives us a lot of runic power. And as you can see here, it caps at 8. So once it's at 8, you can no longer get any more. So make sure that when you do it, that you have it to where it's at least a little lower. So here I am at 5. I have anywhere from 2 to 4, so I'll click it again. I'm up to 8 again, and then I'll just kind of pop them down. And now, as you can see, as I'm popping them, I'm getting my nice little ticker here for Unholy Frenzy, which increases my attack speed. So basically, what you're going to be trying to utilize is making sure that you get it up to 8, and then you're going to be using your other ability of Scourge Strike to pop them. Usually it only pops 1, but because of the legendary I have, it pops 1 to 2. And as you can see here, you just pop it, boop, okay, go back. And then basically what you're trying to do is popping them and keeping that thing up at all times. Now, also don't forget your Plague. And then we're going to get to our last ability here of Death Coil, which is your runic power ability. Now, you might be looking at Death Coil and just be like, okay, so it just does flat damage. No, it actually does something that is also very important. Your pet's energy bar. So this is another thing, a good tidbit that if you can learn, it will make you a really good DPS overall. So we're going to do this. We're going to pop all of our different wounds on them. As you can see here, his energy bar went up. So it's low. We give it boom. He gets 10 back. And that's basically the rotation you kind of want to have with this. Now let's talk about the actual cooldowns you have here. You have Army of the Dead, which is your 10-minute, basically your big Zerk sort of based cooldown. Now what is important about this one is it scales with haste. So when you have sort of things like, for example, Bloodlust or drums being used, you want to pop this because it scales with that damage, along with the Valkyrie and along with your pet. So that's very important to keep in mind when sort of using these things. So if this was, say, a raid boss, we'll use this one for example. Okay, so we're gonna first off summon our pet. We're gonna run in here. We're gonna drop our Plague, drop a couple of Festering Wounds on here. Then we're gonna use the ability Apocalypse, which allows us to have a little mini Army of the Dead. Keep in mind that caps at 6, so after it's at 6 it will not spawn anymore. Then we're going to summon all of our different things here. Now that we've summoned our Valkyrie, we want to spin all of our power in there, keep our dot up there. Then we're going to be doing that, putting our more Festering Wounds up there. Then using more Scourge Strikes. I'm going to use my Trinket while I'm at it. And as you can see here, we're maintaining that nice little Unholy Frenzy, keeping that above 10 seconds. As you can see here, the timer's going down, so we're just going to do that. And boom. Look at that. Now, obviously, I'm slowing down my DPS. You're going to be doing this a lot faster. You're not going to be kind of slowing down like I am, but that's basically how you would actually do it. Alright, so we're going to reset this real quick, and I will show you with a full opener what you would do. So we're going to call off our pet here, and I will show you how to actually do the damage right. Okay, clear that off, wait for the stacks to drop off so I can show you the correct way. Okay, summon our pet, chill. Okay, now we wait for our cooldown to kind of come back. Okay, here we go. So here's how you're basically going to want to open up if you were to fight a raid boss. You're going to jump in, you're going to drop your outbreak, you're going to run in, do a few festering strikes, drop that, drop your pet, go in, drop that again. You want to drop all your death coil. Basically, you don't want this bar to be at all full. Then you're going to do that. Now, by this point, somebody would have had to have dropped Bloodlust. That would have been the point that you would have dropped Army. But if we were to drop Army, it would basically just pop at the same time that we would use our Valkyrie. So we'll go ahead and pop all of those wounds. Dump all of our points in there. Make sure our plague is up. And I guess we could probably show you guys the Valkyrie too. So let's see how high we can get this Valkyrie. So I'm not, as you can see here, I'm not summoning the Valkyrie yet. I'm waiting till I have enough of those sort of runic power being spent. So now I've summoned her. I'm using all my runic power here. As you can see here, I specifically left it enough to where I could make it do more. So I could gain more runic power while she was up, maximizing the amount of damage that she could do. And as you can see, my DPS is going up a crap ton because of that, but I'm letting my dot fall off. That's very important not to let that fall off, because as you can see here, it's probably going to be dropping pretty soon. But basically, that's how you do it. Now, also keep in mind, there are better legendaries out there, so that's going to be the last part of our discussion here. These legendaries that I have are not that good. Specifically, they're actually probably some of the more B tier ones. The actual ones that you're going to be wanting to utilize, which I've been unlucky to get, is Cold Heart. Cold Heart is really a good one to have. Basically, it slowly adds stacks of Cold Heart to it, and then you would add Chain of Ice, and then there's shoulders that you want to get that power up these two. If you have that legendary, you want to pop these two at the same time, and if you have that one, if you have Cold Heart, you want to be using Chains of Ice in your rotation as your opener and every other couple of seconds or whatever. So whenever you would use your Death Glow, you would use it as well. I've just been unlucky, but those are the go-to legendaries. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoy. I know this is a lot to kind of dive in, and I kind of dive into the numbers a lot. That's just kind of how I am. But I wanted to show you guys a little bit of the tips and tricks along the way so you guys can fully understand how the Unholy DK works. I hope you guys do enjoy. I do love playing World of Warcraft and just talking and discussing with you guys. So if you guys have any questions or whatnot, put them in the comments below. And obviously, I hope I'm going to be downing sort of Argus hopefully this week, honestly, but time will tell, and there should be a video of that up pretty soon. I mean, I've already downed them on normal, but normal's kind of pathetic right now. I'm hoping I can down them on heroic, and then maybe we could get a mythic kill by the end of next month, hopefully. Anyways, I thank you guys for watching, and I will see you guys next time.